the old ways of working that might have been the industrial age, where things might have been straightforward, or they might have been complicated, but there was a sequence to things, or you're in a conveyor belt, or you do this, you do that, you do that. Actually, you can't work in that way anymore. So we do need to challenge and question how we're going to work. And because things are more complex, we need to work more dynamically together. And in order to do that, we need to not just stay on the same path that we've been on. So that's why listening to different perspectives is so, so important. I think we said, didn't we, before, Jim, it's not just about being a rebel for the sake of it. You know, I've got that in me. It's not about that, though. It's about, you know, finding the way forward together. Times are interesting. They're different. They're divisive. And if we're going to find solutions, then we need to work out how to work well together to do that.
Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. I'm in Bangkok in Thailand today, so a little bit further from where I usually am. I'm Shalini. Welcome to Coaching Done Well. I am joined by my host, as ever, Jim Thompson. Jim, how you doing?
Well, I'll tell you, we are in a change of seasons here in upstate New York. I mean, the weather's getting colder. Halloween weather was miserable. The poor little kids who love trick-or-treating just got taken away from the bad weather. And next year, the highs are going to be in the 40s. So, you know, my grandson, got to make sure he's got his winter coat when he's going to school. So it's probably a little bit warmer where you two good folks are. So, and what a wonderful guest we got here today. Wow. You just, you pull out all the stops here, Shane.
We have certainly got an amazing guest on today, and as we have throughout this season, actually. But yeah, Jim, I'm actually warming up at the minute because Shanghai has dropped in temperature recently, but all is well in Bangkok, where it's sunny and warm all year. So it's pretty nice out here. But hey, let me welcome our brilliant guest, Tamara Zaple, Rolfs, the incredible Tamara. Tamara, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Hi, Shane. Hi, Jim. Thank you. Yeah, it's great to be here. And I'm very pleased that you've invited me on today. And I'm doing very well in Derby in the UK in our standard autumnal weather. It's nothing, not too cold, not too warm. It's just great.
I miss British autumn so much. I miss those colours more than anything.
It is beautiful.
One of our favourite seasons. Tamara, why don't you introduce yourself for our audience today?
So I am a leadership coach and have my own business now. But most of my career, I have been in education. I actually started my career as a TA in a special school. And that's where I caught the bug, really. And always had an interest in SEN. Thought I would end up in SEN, but didn't. I think the other relevant thing to mention is that I did an anthropology degree because it does relate to coaching. Because what anthropology taught me was to seek to understand. And essentially, that's a huge part of coaching. So it feels like I've done a full circle. And I obviously qualified as a teacher. And before I knew it, I had become an executive head at the age of 32, which was not really intentional. And I just loved what I did. Loved the community that I worked in inner city Derby, very culturally diverse, underserved community. And basically people kept leaving around me and I felt like I was the only person standing. It was a difficult time in that particular school when I became an executive head. And I'd like to think that I've provided a bit of stability there with that school. And I've been listening to a few of your podcast episodes, and I know that Rachel Lofthouse gets mentioned quite a bit. And I was super lucky to work with Rachel. I didn't realise what a superstar she was really at the time, but her work with the teachers in my school, and we worked with speech and language specialists, influenced sort of how I worked as a school leader. And the importance of really listening, I suppose, to everyone, to teachers, and to sort of co-create change together. I was an executive head. And then when I had my children, I became an EAL consultant, set up my own business, worked with lots and lots of schools in Derby and Leicester, and learned an awful lot about implementing change in different contexts and how important context is, and how schools are so different, in terms of their culture and their personality and, the areas that they serve and why that is so important. I went back to being an executive head because I missed being in with the children and pace of things, really. So I did 5 years in a trust. And then because of my own personal circumstances, I decided to step away from that so I could spend a bit more time with my own children because they needed me. But I also knew that I could create a job for myself as well that could be wonderful. And I'd experienced coaching with another coach, an amazing coach called Brian, who I've actually been speaking to today. And he was a team coach. And I did team coaching with him in my last job as an executive head. And I knew that there was so much power in coaching and how it can be so transformative. So I knew that my work was going to lead in that direction, and it very much has done.
Wow, what an absolute journey from anthropology to young executive leader to consultant to coach. Amazing. Really delighted to have you with us, Tamara. And we have not just got you with us, but we've also got a lovely community online. I know there's people joining on YouTube, on LinkedIn. Wow. Guess who else is with us? Jason Booton is there in the comments on LinkedIn. Jason loves the fact that he gets a digital reminder to join. He is back home in the UK, but he's just been to Tonga, where I know he's doing some good work in South Island. Loves the shout out to Rachel Lofthouse. And yeah, Jason will be chatting to soon on the pod because he's just co-authored a wonderful book with Rachel
December, right?
Lofthouse and Trista Wright, which we're going to be chatting to them later. Great to have you here tuning in, Jason. Jim, I'll hand it over to you.
Well, we just are tickled pink, as they say on this side of the pond, having Tamara here. Tamara, I usually ask, what does coaching done well look like, sound like, and feel like to our folks out there? But I want to just get at something that you wrote about. And it says, in a post, you reflected on a recent coaching session where a senior leader shared, it might sound like a small thing, but I'm so pleased that parents now smile as they come into school. You go on to say that not all progress can be measured in numbers. You also invite us to notice the green shoots. When we talk about coaching done well, we're looking at those green shoots. Could you talk to us a little bit more about what's on your mind when you say you invite us to notice the green shoots?
Okay, so I think it's just stand back and reflect. And in schools, and I've only worked in the UK, and I realise that the audience here is international, but I think it's the same across the board, that we measure the measurable, the easily measurable. And some of that relational stuff isn't so easy to measure. And I think it's important to step back and look at that relational stuff that might not be so easy to measure, and notice the changes that you are implementing or that are happening that may be positive that you can't measure in numbers yet. So when I put out that post, and it was reflecting on a conversation I'd had with a coaching client who was a head teacher, it's very hard to say, I have made progress in this area over this term, and as head teachers, we are judged a lot, expected to show that progress, which I absolutely understand. But sometimes the progress that you see is not measurable. And I think the green shoots are just those little things, those moments and the interactions. I think that's what I'm saying.
Well, that's delightful. I'm going to ask one more, then I'm going to, for your response, and I'll get Shane in on here. Because I think this is linked to this powerful point you made about connection. And you're right that in this increasingly digital age, we're all craving our innate desires to connect well. And as Adam Kahane reminds us, the world might be cracking under pressure, but where there are cracks, the light can get in. Can you say a little bit more about what the light's trying to find and see the light between the cracks and creating powerful connections and the force for change?
I can talk about that, definitely. So my podcast, Beyond the Status Quo, that Shane very kindly has helped set up, and he was our very first guest. So we are influenced by Adam Kane, myself and Catherine Gorman, and we also have a slight obsession with cracks. And the world is fracturing. We can see that things are changing, things don't seem right. But often when there's a crack, it means there's an opportunity there. And what I see is people all around the world, and I feel very, very privileged in my work now to be able to connect and see the value in connecting with people around the world who actually are navigating through those cracks. They see the hope and the opportunities, and never before have we been able to connect in a way that we can now because of social media. And social media gets a bad press in many ways. And, I have my own issues with that, with my children, for example, which we won't go to. But actually, if we can leverage that ability to connect in a positive way, then these people who are doing amazing things and shining the light through the cracks, then I'm sure we can do good things. So I am very hopeful with that. I also love that phrase, and it comes from, as Adam Kahane has explained and explains in his book, he has explained that it comes from a Leonard Cohen lyric. So, and I have now a slight obsession with that song. The song's called Anthem, and the lyric is, "Where there's a crack, the light gets in." So, or something along those lines. So, and it's true, isn't it? And I think you can, and when you think about coaching, and life coaching sometimes gets a bit of a bad press, but I am a fan of that as well, having gone through a little bit of a tricky time myself, had my own cracks that I've needed to navigate through. I think actually coaching is very forward focused. It's very empowering for the individual, and it enables people to see the cracks and to get that clarity, but also see the opportunity and be very forward focused in terms of moving forward. Hopefully that explains that a little bit.
That's delightful. Shane, what's on your mind hearing all this good stuff?
It really is good stuff. Like, there's a lot on my mind right now because I just can't believe how we can do this podcast, time after time and speak around the same theme, which is coaching, and have such interesting nuance and takes on different ideas. And I love what you were just saying there, Tamara. I mean, first, I agree. Social media can be one of those things that we love to hate, but we also do love because the connection that you can take through it is incredible. And I mean, I'm taking this room as an example because Jim, we met, on the Twitter days back then, LinkedIn, I wouldn't have gotten to know you and be having this conversation right now. Like, that's very special to me. So definitely it's always been why I've been a bit nervous of people saying, well, just kind of cut it out totally when you're discussing the negatives, because it's not quite that simple. And I love the connection. But I also really, really love your framing of cracks as opportunities. It reminds me, brought her up a few times on this pod, of Amy Edmondson's works on mistakes and not just the fluffy kind of we learn from our mistakes, but actually that we need mistakes. We need those cracks for the light to get in. We sometimes, all the great things that happen in the world have happened on the back of someone trying something, making a mistake, or being vulnerable in some way and exposing their cracks and letting someone bring them some light, or letting an idea take them. So this deeply, deeply resonates with me. We've got a few people online, and I'd love to just bring in comments as well. Please do have...
Can I just mention about the connection thing that Jim mentioned as well? Because going back to my anthropology roots, we are socially programmed to behave in certain ways because of evolution. We have evolved in that way. And sometimes we are quite focused in terms of achieving our goals, and that's great. But actually, we have also, historically evolved. If we think of our hunter-gatherers past, how people had to collaborate in order to survive and thrive and live well together. And I think we need to lean into that more, because that is innately in us. And I see that in the social media that I see online and just all the interactions. Because of this digital world, people are feeling isolated, even though we're connecting online. Sometimes it's not the healthiest connections. And actually, how can we lean into our human ability to connect and collaborate to our own well-being and sustainability, but also for sustainable working and working in a good way for society. So it's in us as humans, and we need to remind ourselves of that.
That's really, really useful framing there, Tamara. Thank you. Thank you for that. And I just want to bring in, maybe you've got comments on this. We've got Ruth joining us. Ruth, it's great to have you back. Ruth says, love that about seeing the opportunities. She says, in my class, we love making marvelous mistakes to support our learners. And it is so nice to hear this, especially about coaching. That's lovely, Ruth. We've also got Jason, who says, what a great phrase, notice the green shoots. It's obvious to see the holistic SEND influence of noticing small signs of progress that build to achievable milestones. Thanks for the comments. Do you have any thoughts on that, Tamara?
This is just marvelous. Well, let me just throw Ted Lasso into this. You know, Ted Lasso
Of
is one of
course.
my favorite persons out there. He reminds us to be curious, not judgmental. And our good friend Michael Bungay Stanier says to stay curious longer. So I'm lucky. I got two people I want to ask this next question to. Because Tamara, I understand you got this really good podcast, Beyond the Status Quo, and you reached far and wide for your inaugural guest to bring on to kind of launch this idea of beyond the status quo. And I understand with this special guest that you had on your inaugural podcast, that the title was Curiouser and Curiouser. And my understanding is, Tamara, your guest was my colleague Shane here. So could you both speak to the interplay of curiosity and humility for navigating our ever complex challenges, that interplay, that dance between humility and curiosity? I'd love to pick both your brains. What's on your mind?
Well, Shane, we named it Curiouser and Curiouser because the podcast that you very kindly were the first person to be our podcast guest, it was clearly about being curious, and that also aligns with your book and the fabulous work that you and Ephraim are doing around the double diamond. And I think for me, you said something in that past, which we recorded that quite a while ago now, but it's about if we could exchange judgment for curiosity, then that would make a huge, huge difference. And I think that is so, so true. So that is the thing that is stuck in my brain from that, amongst other things. But I think especially in education, just ask the questions, be curious, don't be so judgmental, don't jump to blaming, actually seek to understand.
I love how you put that. My goodness, what an honor to be the inaugural guest. I was like so touched to be asked. So thank you for that. And it's funny, like we had planned a wonderful conversation together, and curiosity emerged as a theme. It's not like we even kind of titled it Curiosity before, didn't we? But the three of us just kind of our natural curiosity got going. And I think for me, it's with curiosity, and it's why I know I'm drawn to coaching so much, is it allows so much from a relationship, and it allows so much from a conversation. And I think it's one of the most forgiving leadership qualities you can have, in my view, in that if you're, a leader, you might be good at strategy or organizing or planning or whatever that is, but they are tricky to get right, and you can go wrong. I rarely see someone go wrong by being a bit more curious in a conversation. Rarely do I see that happen. And often it actually unleashes something you haven't quite figured out, you haven't quite planned. So I love it. And Tamara, you exemplify curiosity in all that you do, not just in your work with coaching, but in how you share online, in how we have wonderful conversations sometimes. And I love to engage with your posts on your reflections on what's happening in education today and where we should be heading. And I think we need that online as well. It makes our social spaces much nicer when we've got people leaning in rather than judging each other within education, but being curious.
Can I just, going to that rarely going wrong with curiosity, I do agree with you, but I think there's a fear there sometimes. Well, there's quite a bit of fear about what will come up, but I think also about how long is this going to take to be curious. And I feel like there's a lot of pressure in in schools, particular, and say, have we got time for this? And so I think, one, how can you give yourself the time? But two, how can you decide, have the mechanisms and the ways of working in place so that you can be curious and you can work through things together at a pace that is right for that situation.
This is just a delightful conversation here. This is like being at Starbucks over here and having an extra strong latte for this old guy here. Well, let me just kind of circle back to kind of a true north that I just hear from your heart and your head, Tamara. Your podcast, I believe, is beyond the status quo. And when we talk about coaching done well on this program, we talk about advancing student success and well-being. We talk about giving the coachee a place to do their best thinking. And ultimately, in this macro sense, maybe this is the most important, that on this journey together, that we become better versions of ourselves. So why is it so important, if not imperative, to think beyond the status quo, and why now?
Good question. Well, the world's changing, isn't it? That goes back to the fractures or the cracks. The world is changing, and the old ways of working that might have been the industrial age, where things might have been straightforward, or they might have been complicated, but there was a sequence to things, or you're in a conveyor belt, or you do this, you do that, you do that. Actually, you can't work in that way anymore. So we do need to challenge and question how we're going to work. And because things are more complex, we need to work more dynamically together. And in order to do that, we need to not just stay on the same path that we've been on. So, and everyone's got a different perspective. So that's why listening to different perspectives is so, so important. And it's not, I think we said, didn't we, before, Jim, it's not just about being a rebel for the sake of it. I've got that in me, I'll be honest. It's not about that though. It's about, finding the way forward together. And times are interesting. They're different. They're divisive. And if we're going to find solutions, then we need to work out how to work well together to do that.
Shane, your thoughts?
Yeah, well, I couldn't have said it better. I think there's no time that it's more important than today for us to A, be a bit more curious, like we were saying, but B, think beyond what the status quo is, because around the world at the minute, the status quo isn't quite serving us in the way we want it. And I think it's so timely for you to bring out a podcast that's really focusing on education, leadership, and organizations, and what is our status quo at the minute? How do we challenge it? But how do we challenge it in the right way, not by judging our system, but by being curious about it? I'm really, really excited about that journey tomorrow.
Okay. Yes, well, I am too.
This is a delight, and this is kind of close to a wrap-up question, because I wander a little bit. Shane's good. He reins me in here, but we kind of like to ask our guests before we leave them, and boy, this has been a blessing to have you on, Tamara. Thank you. What do you hope for?
Gosh, that's a good question. What do I hope for? I hope that people are a little bit more curious, but also more courageous in how they work together. And I think courage is really important, and it's not easy. And, the word compassion comes to mind, and I use that a lot, but being compassionate isn't easy. So actually it's about realizing that things are difficult, and working well together is difficult, and being compassionate is difficult, but actually together people can do that. And I know we said we were going to talk about team coaching, and we haven't, because we've been talking about other things, but actually team coaching is essentially about co-creating change together and being curious together, and the mechanisms and the systems and the tools to do that. And, I hope that there's a greater understanding of the value of that, I suppose, in society in general, but I can obviously see that in education.
What a delightful response. Shane, what are your thoughts as we wind things down with this wonderful guest?
Well, two things. Yes, we have to have you on for a second chat at some point tomorrow, because we've got so much we need to discuss. But I still think, even though we haven't really focused too much on team coaching today, there's been so much value in this conversation, and I've just loved it. I love those 3 C's that you brought up. And you don't often hear them together. Curiosity, yes. Compassion, love it. But courage to actually go there. And we as educators in a world that is not necessarily putting education at the top of the pyramid where it maybe we believe it should be, we do
Mm.
need to be courageous in our approaches, but courageous in our curiosity and compassionate approaches. Gosh, do you know, it's always really difficult for me this, because look, it's for you guys, you've got gym is first thing in the morning there. This wakes you up a good, and you've got midday. It always leaves me at the end of the day with my mind whirring, and my mind is whirring in the best way now. I'm not going to sleep tonight. So thanks ever so much for that, Tamara.
Oh, well, thank you. I'm midday here, so I've still got lots of work and my children back. So yeah, but it's been absolutely fabulous to meet you, Jim, in person, online in person. And obviously see you again, Shane. So thank you so much. It's been fabulous to chat to you.
Thank you so much. Jim, do you have any closing thoughts before we bring this conversation to a close?
You know, we throw around terms like a purpose-driven life and a life well lived. But Tamara, you're leading a purpose-driven life. You're leading a life well lived, and you're making a difference. You're making a difference for us. You know, when we, I always talk about that the answer is in the room. And this is what we try to do with Coaching Done Well a couple times every month. We try to create this room for people internationally to bring their coffee or their adult beverage or
Mm.
whatever, and just sit and chat and listen.
Mm.
And that's what this has been, just a wonderful conversation. Is what Jim and I talks about, those better conversations. This was one of those. So thank you, Shane, for snagging this great guest, and I hope we do have her on again.
Absolutely. And we've got gratefulness coming in all sides. We have Ruth there in the conversation saying, great to listen to you, Tamara. Thank you. We've got Jason. Thanks for the valuable reflections. And Jason says, to quote Eleanor Drago Severson, it's important to feel well held in authentic collaborations. Well, I'm certainly feeling well held in this conversation. I wonder, Tamara, if you've got any closing reflections before we say goodbye today?
Just I think it's going back to that point of the connecting across the world. I mean, I just feel exceptionally privileged to be doing this. And, if anyone else listening out there would like to connect with me, I would absolutely love that, because I think, that we need to leverage that. And, so much value personally and collectively from doing so.
Well, you absolutely must. And you can you're on LinkedIn is probably the best place, right, Tamara,
Yes. I
to
think
get
I
in touch?
might be the only Tamara Zaple world. So that's a
Yeah, there's a handy thing about having a unique name.
yeah.
Tamara, thank you so much for joining us. Jim, as always, it's been an absolute pleasure. And thank you so much to those who've been joining in live. It is really, really lovely to have a whole community here with us. If you do join us live, like, you can just listen along as you did, or you can join in like we had Jason and Ruth there. It was lovely to have your thoughts. It feels like you're in the room with us. And it's always gorgeous. But you may be listening to this on catch up, if you like, and that's on our podcast, Coaching Done Well, which is on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. You can catch up, you can watch back there. If you are listening there and you want to join us live, come into LinkedIn and YouTube. You'll find out more information there. But for now, I'll say good morning, good afternoon, good night, and look forward to seeing you all soon.
Thanks so much.
Bye bye. Thank you.